She parked 2 trucks in my garage without asking, then filed a $2,000 HOA complaint against me for unauthorized commercial activity. Too bad she didn't know I leased that garage to the county sheriff. At 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, I walked outside to find 2 massive diesel trucks blocking my entire garage, still warm, still reeking of exhaust, oil already staining my concrete floor. The metallic ping of cooling engines mixed with that sharp chemical smell of fresh motor oil burning my nostrils. Through her kitchen window, Brenda was watching me with a coffee mug and the most satisfied smirk I'd ever seen. Like she'd just checkmate me in some game I didn't know we were playing. What she didn't realize, Deputy Martinez was coming by in 2 hours to pick up tactical equipment, and that HOA violation notice she'd already prepared, it was about to become evidence in her own harassment case. The woman had just declared war on someone who documents everything and rents property to law enforcement. What would you do if someone stole your garage then tried to fine you for it? Drop your wildest neighbor's story below. My name's Dale, and at 52, I've learned that most problems have simple solutions. 28 years, fixing engines at the Ford dealership taught me patience, precision, and how to spot trouble before it ruins your day. But nothing prepared me for Brenda. I inherited this corner lot ranch house in Millfield, Texas when my wife Sarah passed 3 years ago. Cancer took her fast, and the medical bills took everything else. Now it's just me, my German Shepherd Rex, and a property that's worth more than I can afford to keep. The salvation came from an unexpected source. The county sheriff's department needed secure storage space, and my detached 3-car garage was perfect. $400 a month doesn't sound like much, but when you're living on disability and a thin pension, it's the difference between keeping your home and joining the foreclosure statistics. Deputy Martinez has been renting space for 18 months now. Stores tactical gear, emergency equipment, evidence bags, shows up twice a week like clockwork, professional and respectful. The concrete floor still holds that honest smell of motor oil from my mechanic days, now mixed with the metallic tang of police-grade equipment and the faint chemical scent of evidence preservation supplies. It's a perfect arrangement that serves the community and keeps my electricity on. Then Brenda moved in next door. Picture a woman who thinks owning a landscaping business makes her the neighborhood's self-appointed property manager. She arrived 6 months ago with husband Chuck, an oil rig worker smart enough to travel for work 11 months out of the year. Within 1 week, she joined the HOA board and started her campaign to enhance property values, which translates to make everyone miserable until they comply with my vision. She drives 2 massive trucks, a company vehicle loaded with commercial mowers and mulch spreaders, and a personal pickup that could haul a small building. Both are too big for her driveway, but instead of renting proper commercial storage, she decided my property looked more convenient. The warning signs started with her backyard barbecue 2 months ago. I'm talking a full production. Catered food, hired DJ, enough alcohol to float a riverboat. The bass thumped so hard it rattled my windows until midnight. Around noon, both her trucks appeared in my driveway like they'd been there forever. I knocked politely. The smell of barbecue smoke mixed with diesel exhaust was already triggering a headache. Brenda, I need you to move your trucks. Deputy Martinez has his scheduled check this afternoon. She barely glanced up from arranging her catered spread. It's just temporary overflow parking. It's my property, not a public lot. Her voice went ice cold. Don't be so dramatic, Dale. 1 afternoon won't kill anyone. 6 hours. She left those trucks there for 6 hours while her party raged on. When Deputy Martinez arrived for his equipment inspection, he had to park on the street and navigate around her vehicles like they were permanent fixtures. The gravel crunched under his boots as he took the long way around. Too professional to complain, but clearly irritated. I apologized 3 times. Most humiliating moment of my retirement. That's when I realized this wasn't about parking convenience, it was about power. Brenda was establishing that her needs trumped everyone else's, including county law enforcement. The harassment escalated immediately. Next week, I caught her photographing my property with her phone, documenting every corner like a private investigator building a case. My garden, my fence, even Rex's doghouse got the surveillance treatment. Just updating neighborhood records for the HOA, she claimed with that same cold smile. Then came the violation notice, printed on cheap copy paper that crackled like autumn leaves. Unapproved commercial activity detected. Cease unauthorized business operations within 30 days or face $2,000 fine. She was targeting my lifeline. Standing there with that notice in my hands, watching her smirk through her kitchen window, the strategy became crystal clear. This wasn't random neighbor drama. This was economic warfare. Brenda had researched my situation, identified my vulnerability, and launched a systematic campaign to destroy my income and force me to sell. Too bad she picked the wrong retired mechanic to mess with. Rex growled low, sensing the threat. Smart dog. He knew we were under attack before I did. 3 days after that humiliating barbecue incident, Brenda fired her first official shot. A certified letter appeared in my mailbox, one of those thick, legal-sized envelopes that screams, "Expensive lawyer," and "You're screwed." The return address read, Millfield Meadows Homeowners Association, but I could practically smell Brenda's cheap perfume on the paperwork. The complaint accused me of running an unauthorized commercial enterprise that violated residential zoning laws. According to her carefully crafted legal fiction, my sheriff's lease constituted a business operation threatening neighborhood character and property values. She demanded immediate termination of all commercial activity, plus a $2,000 fine for ongoing violations. Here's where her homework got sloppy. She'd scheduled an emergency HOA board meeting for Tuesday, and somehow forgot to notify me until Monday afternoon. Classic ambush tactics: catch the target unprepared and steamroll them into submission. Too bad she picked the wrong mechanic to blindside. I spent Saturday morning at the county courthouse breathing in that distinctive smell of old paper and bureaucratic dust while digging through property records. The filing room felt like a library where excitement goes to die, but sometimes boring paperwork contains explosive surprises. "Well, I'll be damned," said Martha the clerk, adjusting her reading glasses as she examined my original deed. "Your garage predates this HOA by 15 years, honey. That's what we call grandfathered use." Martha explained something I'd never considered. When you build something before an HOA exists, those improvements get protected under what lawyers call grandfathered use clauses. Basically, your property rights can be older and stronger than their new rules. Sarah would have loved this legal loophole. She always said the best defense was knowing more than your opponent. But the real bombshell came when I researched Brenda's own situation. Municipal code clearly states that commercial vehicles over 10,000 pounds require special permits for overnight residential parking. Both her landscaping trucks exceeded that weight, and she had exactly 0 permits on file. Tuesday evening, I walked into that community center meeting room armed with facts and feeling dangerous. The space reeked of burnt coffee and nervous sweat. 5 board members sat behind a folding table that looked like it came from a church rummage sale, with Brenda positioned dead center like a judge at sentencing. "Mr. Hensley," she began, consulting her notes with theatrical importance, "your unauthorized commercial lease clearly violates Section 4.3 of our residential use covenant. We're prepared to impose immediate fines." "Hold up there, counselor," I interrupted, sliding my courthouse research across that cheap table. "My garage was built in 1987. Your HOA didn't exist until 2002. That's 15 years of grandfathered protection." The sound of rustling papers filled the sudden silence. You could hear a pin drop until Frank Morrison, a retired postmaster who'd lived here since dirt was young, started chuckling like he'd just heard the best joke of the year. "Dale's absolutely right," Frank announced, reviewing my documents. "I remember when you built that garage. My late wife Clara brought you lemonade during construction." Brenda's face went from pale to red to purple in about 3 seconds. "That's completely irrelevant. Current zoning supersedes—" "Speaking of current zoning," I said, savoring every word, "let's discuss Section 12.7 regarding commercial vehicle storage in residential areas." I produced photographs of her trucks, complete with manufacturer weight specifications and time-stamped overnight parking evidence. "Both your vehicles exceed the 10,000-pound residential limit. You've been in violation for 6 months without proper permits." Frank actually slapped the table and burst out laughing. "Well, Brenda, sounds like you better read those zoning laws yourself before throwing them at other folks. Looks like Dale just turned your own ammunition against you." The room went dead silent as everyone processed what had just happened. Brenda had walked into her own trap, using zoning laws to attack me while violating those exact same laws herself. Her face cycled through about 6 different shades of embarrassment. "This is absolutely ridiculous," Brenda exploded, her carefully constructed authority crumbling like wet cardboard. "I'm trying to protect our property values from his police compound." "You mean the arrangement that brings county law enforcement through our neighborhood twice a week?" asked board member Patricia Walsh sweetly. "The same one that probably lowered everyone's homeowner insurance rates?" The meeting collapsed faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Brenda demanded real legal action and stormed out, abandoning her violation notice like toxic waste. The remaining board voted 4-0 to dismiss all charges against me and issued Brenda a formal citation for her commercial vehicle violations. Walking to my truck afterward, I could taste victory in the crisp evening air mixed with the lingering diesel exhaust from her illegally parked trucks. But through her kitchen window, I watched Brenda pacing and gesturing wildly into her phone, probably speed-dialing every lawyer and city official she could think of. The next morning confirmed my suspicions. Her trucks were strategically positioned to block my mailbox access, not technically illegal, but annoying enough to send a clear message. By noon, the city had received an anonymous complaint about excessive dog barking from my property. Rex hadn't barked excessively since puppyhood, but facts don't matter during a harassment campaign. Round 1, Dale. But Brenda was just getting warmed up. Brenda's public humiliation at the HOA meeting lasted exactly 48 hours before she escalated to City Hall. The certified letter from Millfield City Planning arrived Friday morning, stamped with enough official seals to intimidate a federal judge. The complaint alleged that my sheriff's lease was creating an unauthorized quasi-commercial district that violated residential character preservation codes, complete with color photographs of Deputy Martinez's patrol car, equipment deliveries, and even shots of me talking to county personnel in my driveway. Someone had been very busy with a telephoto lens. The letter cited Municipal Code Section 8.4 about maintaining neighborhood residential character and demanded my appearance at a planning commission hearing in 2 weeks. But here's what caught my attention. The complaint was filed by concerned residents, but processed by Jennifer Walsh from the planning office. That name rang a bell since Patricia Walsh from the HOA board had mentioned her daughter worked at City Hall. Small towns have a way of making everything family business, and apparently Jennifer had inherited her mother's sense of fairness along with her last name. I decided to pay Jennifer a visit before that hearing. The city planning office smelled like industrial carpet and broken dreams, tucked into the basement of a municipal building designed by someone who clearly hated natural light. Jennifer turned out to be a tired-looking woman in her 30s who avoided eye contact like I was carrying the plague. "Mr. Hensley," she said, fidgeting with her paperwork, "I suppose you're here about the zoning complaint." "I'm here about the truth," I replied, settling into the visitor chair that creaked like old bones. "See, I've been wondering how someone knew to file this complaint using exactly the right legal language and perfect timing." Jennifer's face flushed red as a stop sign. "I can't discuss ongoing cases," she mumbled. "Fair enough, but while I'm here, maybe you could help me understand something about home business permits." I'd spent the previous evening doing research that would have made Sarah proud, diving deep into municipal codes until my eyes burned. Turns out running a landscaping business from your residence requires specific permits, especially when you're storing commercial vehicles and meeting clients at your home address. Brenda's business registration listed her home as the primary office, but she'd never filed for a home occupation permit. The oversight was like leaving your front door wide open while complaining about burglars. "Hypothetically," I continued, pulling out printed municipal codes, "what happens when someone operates a commercial business from residential property without proper permits?" Jennifer reviewed the documents, and I watched her professional composure crumble faster than a house of cards in a windstorm. "These trucks are... how much do they weigh?" she asked weakly. "Over 12,000 pounds each. Both registered as commercial vehicles, both parked overnight in residential zones without permits," I explained, savoring every word. The irony was beautiful. Brenda was using residential character preservation laws to attack me while violating those exact same laws herself. "There's something else," I said, producing photographs from her barbecue party showing client consultations happening at her residence. Landscaping estimates, design meetings, payment collections, all commercial activity in a residential zone. Jennifer stared at the evidence like it might explode. "Mr. Hensley, this puts me in a difficult position. I'm not asking you to do anything dishonest," I assured her. "I'm just wondering if the Planning Commission should have all the facts before making decisions about residential character preservation." 2 weeks later, the hearing room was packed tighter than sardines in a can. Brenda arrived with a briefcase and enough attitude to power a small city, clearly expecting another easy victory. She'd even dragged her husband Chuck along for moral support, though he looked like he'd rather be wrestling angry bears. "Mr. Hensley's commercial lease operation fundamentally alters the residential character of our neighborhood," Brenda began, consulting her prepared notes with theatrical importance. "We have documented evidence of increased traffic, commercial vehicle activity, and unauthorized business operations. She presented her photo evidence with the confidence of a prosecutor making a slam-dunk case, every image designed to make my arrangement look like a truck stop operation. Then it was my turn. "Commission members," I said, standing slowly for maximum dramatic effect. "Mrs. Thompson is absolutely right about protecting residential character. That's why I was surprised to discover her own violations of the same codes she's citing." I presented my counter-evidence methodically: Brenda's unpermitted home business operations, her commercial vehicles exceeding residential weight limits, client meetings conducted at her residence without proper zoning variances. Every violation she'd accused me of, she was committing herself, only worse. The best part? Jennifer Walsh had done her homework after our conversation, and the Planning Commission had a complete file of Brenda's violations sitting right there on the table. Commission Chairman Robert Hayes cleared his throat with the authority of someone about to drop a bomb. "Mrs. Thompson, it appears you're operating a commercial landscaping business from your residence without proper permits." Brenda's confident expression melted like ice cream in August heat. That's completely different," she sputtered. "Actually," Hayes continued, "Mr. Hensley's arrangement appears to be properly documented and legally established, while your business operations are not." The commission voted 5-0 to dismiss the complaint against me and issued violation notices to Brenda for unpermitted commercial operations. Chuck looked like he wanted to crawl under the table and disappear forever. Walking out of that hearing, I could smell victory mixed with Brenda's desperation, but I also knew this wouldn't end here. Public embarrassment twice in a month would drive someone like Brenda to dangerous desperation. Sure enough, the next morning brought fresh scratches on my mailbox and an insurance claim notice in my driveway. Round 2. Dale. But the game was just getting interesting. The insurance claim notice appeared in my driveway like a rotten surprise, fluttering in the morning breeze alongside what looked like fresh evidence of vandalism. According to Brenda's meticulously detailed complaint, Deputy Martinez's patrol car had allegedly scraped her fence during a routine equipment pickup, causing extensive property damage and ongoing safety concerns. The estimated repair cost? $3,500, plus additional compensation for emotional distress and inconvenience. I walked over to examine the so-called damage, Rex trotting beside me with his nose working overtime. The scratches on Brenda's wooden fence looked fresh enough to still smell like paint thinner. That sharp chemical odor that burns your nostrils and screams, "recent application." The marks ran in perfectly straight lines about bumper height, too uniform to be accidental damage. Either Deputy Martinez had invented a way to scrape wood through solid air, or someone had gotten creative with spray paint and a putty knife. "Morning, Dale," called my neighbor Mildred from her garden, where she was deadheading roses with the precision of a surgeon. At 78, Mildred had survived the neighborhood's evolution from farmland to subdivision, and her memory was sharper than her pruning shears. "Saw some interesting activity over at Brenda's place yesterday evening. Woman was out there with a can of something, working on that fence real hard." She paused, giving me a look that could cut glass. "Funny thing is, I could have sworn that fence looked fine during my afternoon walk." Mildred's Ring doorbell system was the neighborhood's unofficial security network, documenting everything from package deliveries to Brenda's escalating harassment campaign. "You might want to check the timestamp on my video from around 6:30 last night," she suggested with the subtle cunning of someone who'd learned that evidence beats accusations every time. I contacted my insurance company immediately, speaking with investigator Carl Thompson, who'd been handling fraudulent claims longer than I'd been fixing engines. Carl had that weary tone of someone who'd seen every scam in the book twice. "Mr. Hensley, we get about 6 fabricated damage claims every month. Most people aren't smart enough to stage them properly, which makes our job easier." He explained that insurance fraud investigations follow specific patterns: timeline analysis, damage assessment, witness interviews, and most importantly, video evidence review. When people try to scam insurance companies, they usually forget about security cameras until it's too late. "What makes this one suspicious?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Well, for starters, the complainant filed within 12 hours of the alleged incident, with professional quality photographs and a repair estimate from a contractor who happens to share her business address. That's either remarkable efficiency or remarkable preparation." Carl arrived the next morning with measurement tools and a camera that could probably photograph fingerprints on raindrops. The fence damage told its own story under professional scrutiny. Scratches too uniform, too fresh, and applied from the wrong angle to match any vehicle impact pattern. These marks were made by hand tools, probably a putty knife or scraper, he explained, pointing out subtle differences in depth and direction. Vehicle damage creates irregular patterns from impact forces and momentum. This looks like someone used a ruler for guidance. The Ring doorbell footage was the knockout punch Brenda never saw coming. Mildred's camera had captured her working on the fence at 6:47 p.m. the previous evening, carefully applying gray spray paint in measured horizontal lines. The video quality was clear enough to read the Rust-Oleum label on the paint can, and the timestamp proved the damage occurred more than 12 hours after Deputy Martinez's last visit to my property. You could even hear Brenda muttering to herself as she worked, probably rehearsing her victim's story. When Carl confronted Brenda with the evidence, the transformation was spectacular. She went from confident complainant to panicked defendant faster than a muscle car hitting a brick wall. "Mrs. Thompson," Carl said with the patience of someone delivering bad news professionally, "insurance fraud is a felony carrying serious penalties, including potential jail time and permanent criminal records." The color drained from Brenda's face like someone had pulled a plug. "This is all a misunderstanding," she stammered, suddenly unable to maintain eye contact with anyone. "I was just touching up some existing damage." "The video shows you creating damage, not repairing it," Carl replied, consulting his notes like a prosecutor reading charges. "You have 24 hours to withdraw this claim voluntarily, or we'll be filing criminal charges with the county prosecutor's office." Brenda withdrew the claim before lunch, but her reputation was permanently damaged. Word travels faster than gossip in small towns, and by evening, everyone knew about her failed insurance scam. The incident finally pushed Chuck over the edge. That night, I overheard him through their open kitchen window, his voice carrying the exhausted frustration of a man who'd reached his breaking point. "Brenda, this has got to stop. Insurance fraud? Really? I'm not going to prison because you can't handle losing an argument." Their marriage was cracking under the pressure of her obsession, and Chuck was smart enough to start planning his exit strategy. But cornered animals are the most dangerous. The next morning brought anonymous complaints to animal control about Rex's aggressive behavior, plus a mysterious inspection notice from the health department about unsanitary property conditions. Brenda was running out of official channels, which meant she'd probably start getting creative soon. Round 3, Dale. But I had a feeling the real war was just beginning. The county tax reassessment notice arrived on a Tuesday that started normal and ended with my world tilted sideways. Millfield County was conducting routine property value updates. Bureaucratic speak for "we need more money and you're going to provide it." My modest ranch house had apparently increased in value by 40% over the past 3 years, which meant my property taxes were about to jump from manageable to catastrophic. I spread the paperwork across my kitchen table, that familiar sinking feeling settling in my stomach like bad coffee. The new assessment put my annual tax bill at nearly $6,000, double what I'd been paying. With my disability pension and small Social Security payments, there was no way to cover that increase without the sheriff's lease income. Hell, even with that $400 monthly, I'd be cutting things dangerously close. That's when I realized why this reassessment felt suspicious. The timing was too convenient, coming right after Brenda's public failures with the HOA and city planning. Property tax assessments usually happen countywide, but this notice specifically targeted my address and 3 others on our street. All longtime residents, all living on fixed incomes, all coincidentally dealing with recent HOA complaints. I drove to the county assessor's office the next morning, hoping to find answers in a building that smelled like old carpet and broken dreams. The clerk, a harried woman named Janet, pulled up my property records with the efficiency of someone who'd answered these questions too many times. "Your assessment was flagged for review based on a complaint about unauthorized commercial improvements," she explained, highlighting sections of the report. "Someone reported that you'd converted residential space for business use without proper permits." The complaint had been filed anonymously, but the description was suspiciously detailed, mentioning the sheriff's lease, equipment storage, and alleged property modifications that didn't exist. Someone had done their homework before trying to weaponize the tax system against me. "Janet," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the anger building in my chest, "that garage was built in 1987. Nothing's been modified or converted. It's the same structure that's been there for decades." She frowned at her computer screen. "The complaint suggests recent commercial improvements and increased property utilization. Our assessor based the new valuation on those reported changes. The system was working exactly as designed. Anonymous complaints triggered reassessments, which increased tax burdens, which forced people out of their homes. It was elegant in its cruelty. But then Janet said something that changed everything. You know, this complaint came through unusual channels. Most reassessment requests come from real estate agents or developers looking to establish market values. This one came directly from a city planning office referral. City planning office. Jennifer Walsh, who'd been feeling guilty about helping Brenda with the zoning complaint. I drove straight to City Hall where Jennifer was waiting with the expression of someone who'd been carrying a heavy secret. "Mr. Hensley," she said before I could speak, "I need to tell you something about that tax reassessment." She explained that Brenda had been pressuring her to find creative solutions for problematic property owners, specifically mentioning elderly and disabled residents who couldn't fight back effectively. The tax reassessment was supposed to be the final blow, force me into financial crisis, make the sheriff's lease unsustainable, and create an opportunity for property acquisition. "She's been asking about other residents too," Jennifer admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Patterson on Elm Street, the Rodriguez family on Oak Avenue, all longtime homeowners, all dealing with unexpected HOA problems recently." The pattern was becoming clear. Brenda wasn't just targeting me. She was running a systematic campaign to force out established residents and acquire undervalued properties for her expanding landscaping business. But Jennifer's guilt had produced an unexpected gift. "I made copies of everything before I realized what was happening," she said, sliding a manila envelope across her desk. Brenda's requests, the complaint details, even some emails discussing neighborhood investment opportunities. She paused, meeting my eyes for the first time. "I can't undo the reassessment immediately, but this evidence might help you fight it." Walking back to my truck, I felt the pieces clicking together like a puzzle Sarah would have solved in minutes. This wasn't personal harassment. This was business. Brenda had identified vulnerable homeowners, researched their financial situations, and developed a strategy to force them out through systematic harassment and bureaucratic manipulation. Too bad she'd picked the wrong mechanic to underestimate. Time to shift from defense to offense. That manila envelope from Jennifer felt like holding dynamite with a lit fuse, but dynamite only works if you know how to use it properly. I needed help, and fortunately, small towns run on networks of people who've been watching out for each other longer than Brenda's been alive. My first stop was the Legal Aid Society office in the county courthouse basement, a cramped space that smelled like coffee grounds and determination. Attorney Rebecca Martinez, Deputy Martinez's sister, as it turned out, specialized in elder abuse and property rights cases. She reviewed Jennifer's evidence with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining x-rays. "This is systematic harassment with clear financial motivation," she said, spreading the documents across her desk like a battle plan. "We're not talking about neighbor disputes anymore. This is organized intimidation designed to force property sales." Rebecca explained that harassment campaigns targeting vulnerable homeowners follow predictable patterns. First, identify properties in desirable locations owned by people with limited resources to fight back. Second, use official channels like HOA complaints and city violations to create financial pressure. Third, escalate until the targets either sell cheap or lose their homes to tax liens. "Your case is textbook predatory behavior," she said. "But having documentation this detailed is extremely rare. Most victims don't know what's happening until it's too late." She outlined our legal strategy. Document everything, file harassment complaints with multiple agencies, and prepare both civil and criminal charges. But more importantly, she suggested expanding the coalition to include other targeted residents. "Predators like Brenda rarely stop with one victim," Rebecca warned. "If we can identify her other targets, we can build a pattern of behavior that's much harder for authorities to ignore." My next stop was Mildred's house, where I found her hosting what she called afternoon tea, but what looked more like a strategic planning session. 3 other longtime residents sat around her kitchen table, all dealing with recent HOA complaints or unexpected city violations. Mrs. Patterson from Elm Street had received noise complaints about her air conditioning unit. The Rodriguez family on Oak Avenue was fighting allegations of unauthorized vehicle storage for their work truck. Frank Morrison, the former postmaster, had been cited for excessive lawn ornaments, his garden gnomes, which had been neighborhood fixtures for 15 years. Brenda's been busy, Mildred observed, refilling coffee cups with the efficiency of someone who'd been organizing neighbors since before HOA boards existed. Every complaint filed within the past 6 months, all targeting people who've been here longer than her sidewalk. The pattern was undeniable once you knew what to look for. Systematic harassment designed to force out established residents and create opportunities for property acquisition. Frank had done his own research, pulling HOA board meeting minutes going back to Brenda's arrival. She's been asking detailed questions about property values, ownership duration, and financial hardship cases, he reported, adjusting his reading glasses. Even requested a list of residents over 65, claiming it was for community outreach planning. The woman had been building target lists like a military operation. Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent 40 years managing teenagers, had noticed something else. She's been photographing properties when owners aren't home, measuring driveways, even checking mailboxes for mortgage company letters. The reconnaissance had been thorough and systematic, gathering intelligence for maximum impact timing. We decided to coordinate our response through what Mildred diplomatically called enhanced neighborhood communication. Everyone would document future incidents with timestamps and photographs. Frank would monitor HOA activities and provide early warning about upcoming complaints. Mrs. Patterson would organize other targeted residents and share legal resources. I would serve as the primary liaison with law enforcement and legal aid. But our most valuable asset was the broader community support we'd been building without realizing it. Local business owners, the hardware store, the diner, even the gas station, had been watching Brenda's escalating behavior with growing concern. Small-town businesses depend on stable neighborhoods, and systematic harassment campaigns are bad for everyone's property values. Tony Castellanos, who owned the hardware store where Deputy Martinez bought supplies, offered to document any unusual purchases that might indicate escalation plans. Woman came in last week asking about security cameras and motion sensors, he reported. Said she needed to monitor property boundary violations. Didn't feel right, so I told her we were out of stock. The diner owner, Maria Santos, had overheard Brenda's phone conversations during lunch meetings with contractors and real estate agents. She's been discussing development opportunities and neighborhood improvements that sound more like property flipping schemes, Maria reported. Even mentioned specific addresses and asking prices. By evening, we'd assembled what Rebecca called the most comprehensive harassment documentation she'd ever seen. Video evidence, witness statements, financial records, and most importantly, evidence of Brenda's systematic targeting of vulnerable residents. We had enough material to file complaints with the county sheriff, the district attorney's office, the State Real Estate Commission, and the Federal Housing Authority. But documentation only works if you're prepared to use it strategically. Rebecca scheduled meetings with law enforcement agencies for the following week, while I prepared for what would probably be Brenda's most desperate escalation attempts yet. Cornered predators don't surrender quietly. They usually double down with increasingly dangerous behavior. The coalition was ready. Time to see how far Brenda was willing to go to protect her schemes. Brenda's desperation revealed itself in increasingly sloppy attacks that showed she was running out of both patience and intelligent options. The morning after our coalition meeting, I discovered that someone had dumped motor oil across my driveway during the night, creating a slick mess that stank like a garage fire and would cost hundreds to clean properly. The timing wasn't coincidental. Deputy Martinez was scheduled for his weekly equipment check that afternoon, and navigating that oil slick would be both dangerous and embarrassing. But Brenda had made her first serious tactical error. Motor oil doesn't just disappear, and the trail of droplets led directly from my driveway to the storm drain, then continued in a suspicious line toward her property. More importantly, she'd used the same high-viscosity oil that landscaping equipment requires, the kind that leaves distinctive additive signatures when tested. I called Rebecca immediately, who arranged for environmental services to document and test the contamination. Illegal dumping of petroleum products carries serious environmental penalties, especially when it threatens municipal water systems. The attacks escalated throughout the week with amateur-hour sabotage that would have been laughable if it wasn't so malicious. Someone loosened the bolts on my mailbox post, leaving it wobbling dangerously close to the street. My garden hose was cut in 3 places, flooding the side yard and killing Sarah's prized rose bushes. Rex's water bowl was mysteriously filled with what smelled like bleach, forcing an emergency vet visit that confirmed chemical poisoning attempts. Each incident was documented with photographs, timestamps, and witness statements from neighbors who were now actively watching for suspicious activity. The pattern revealed Brenda's growing desperation and declining judgment. Instead of sophisticated harassment through official channels, she devolved into crude vandalism that left evidence trails a blind detective could follow. Mildred's Ring doorbell system captured shadowy figures moving through our yards after midnight, always approaching from the direction of Brenda's house. The footage quality wasn't clear enough for positive identification, but the timing and movement patterns were building a convincing circumstantial case. Frank Morrison discovered something even more damaging during his HOA board monitoring. Brenda's been using board letterhead to file false complaints with multiple city departments, he reported during our evening strategy session. Noise violations, health code infractions, even allegations of illegal dumping, all targeting the same longtime residents we identified. She was essentially impersonating official HOA business to weaponize city bureaucracy against her targets. That level of fraud elevated her harassment campaign into serious criminal territory. The breakthrough came when Mrs. Patterson's security system captured Brenda in the act of damaging property. The retired teacher had installed motion-activated cameras after her air conditioning unit was vandalized, and Tuesday night's footage showed Brenda clearly attempting to disconnect electrical connections to the outdoor unit. The video quality was courtroom-ready, with timestamps, clear facial identification, and documentation of criminal trespass and attempted destruction of property. But Brenda's most serious error was interfering with emergency services. Thursday morning brought a house fire 3 blocks away. Mrs. Morgan's kitchen caught fire during breakfast preparation, filling her home with dangerous smoke. When the fire department responded, they found their usual equipment access blocked by strategically placed construction barriers that hadn't been there the previous day. The barriers forced firefighters to drag hoses an additional 100 yards, delaying their response by precious minutes while an elderly woman's life hung in the balance. Fire Chief William Torres was furious when he discovered the barriers had been placed without city permits or notification to emergency services. Someone deliberately obstructed emergency access during an active fire response, he announced at an emergency city council meeting. This isn't vandalism or harassment. This is criminal endangerment that could have killed someone. The barriers had been purchased from Brenda's regular supplier and delivered to locations that would specifically impact emergency response to the targeted neighborhood. The interference with emergency services was the final straw that pushed our situation from civil dispute into criminal investigation territory. Sheriff's Deputy Martinez filed a formal report with the county prosecutor's office, documenting the pattern of escalating harassment, property destruction, and public safety interference. This has moved beyond neighbor disputes, he explained during his official statement. We're looking at organized criminal activity designed to force property sales through intimidation and sabotage. Local newspaper reporter Sarah Kim began investigating after Chief Torres's public statements about emergency access interference. Her preliminary article, Systematic Harassment Campaign Targets Elderly Residents, brought regional attention to Brenda's activities and prompted calls from other communities dealing with similar predatory behavior. The story was gaining momentum that would be impossible for Brenda to control or contain. By Friday evening, Brenda's landscaping business was hemorrhaging clients as word spread about her criminal activities. Chuck's truck was conspicuously absent from their driveway most nights, and neighbors reported hearing heated arguments about lawyers, divorce proceedings, and bankruptcy possibilities. The pressure was finally breaking apart her life the same way she'd tried to destroy ours. But cornered predators become most dangerous when they realize their schemes are collapsing. Saturday morning brought an envelope under my door containing photographs of my daily routines, Rex's walking schedule, and even shots taken through my kitchen window. The message was clear. If legal harassment couldn't force me out, maybe personal intimidation would succeed. Time for the final confrontation. Our coalition had the evidence, the community support, and the legal backing to end this war once and for all. Sunday morning arrived with unseasonable quiet, the kind of stillness that makes you check over your shoulder expecting trouble. I was refilling Rex's water bowl when Brenda appeared at my back gate, dressed in what she probably considered her most trustworthy outfit, pressed khakis and a polo shirt that screamed, "Reasonable person making a reasonable offer." The transformation from harassing neighbor to concerned citizen would have been convincing if I hadn't spent months documenting her escalating criminal behavior. "Dale," she called out with artificial sweetness that made my teeth ache, "could I have a word with you? I think we need to clear the air about all these misunderstandings." She was carrying a manila envelope thick enough to contain either legal documents or something more interesting. Given her track record with envelopes, I was betting on the latter. I activated the voice recording app on my phone before opening the gate, a habit Rebecca had drilled into me after we'd started building the criminal case. "What can I do for you, Brenda?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral while Rex positioned himself between us with the protective instincts of a dog who'd learned to recognize threats. "Look, I know things have gotten a little heated between us," she began, settling into what was obviously a rehearsed speech. "But I've been thinking about how we can resolve this whole situation without involving lawyers and courts and all that unpleasantness." She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of cash thick enough to choke a horse. "I'm prepared to offer you $20,000 cash to voluntarily terminate your arrangement with the sheriff's department. Clean break, no hard feelings, everybody wins." The smell of fresh bills mixed with her desperation was almost overwhelming. $20,000 represented more money than I'd seen in one place since Sarah's life insurance payout, and Brenda knew exactly how tempting that would be for someone facing increased property taxes and mounting legal bills. She'd done her financial homework before making this offer. "That's very generous," I said carefully, letting her dig her own grave deeper. "But why would you want me to end a legal arrangement that benefits the community?" She leaned forward with the intensity of someone making their final play. "Between you and me, Dale, I've got some big plans for this neighborhood. Development opportunities that could benefit everyone, but they require certain adjustments to the current situation." There it was, the admission Rebecca had been hoping for. Brenda was essentially confessing to a systematic scheme to manipulate property values and force out longtime residents for development purposes. "What kind of development opportunities?" I asked, keeping her talking while the recording app captured every incriminating word. "Well, your corner lot has tremendous commercial potential," she explained, warming to her subject like a salesperson closing a deal. "Prime location, existing infrastructure, easy access for commercial vehicles. With the right improvements, it could be worth 3 times what you paid for it." She paused dramatically. "Of course, that would require removing certain complications that might interfere with proper development." The bribery attempt was textbook criminal behavior, but Brenda wasn't finished digging her legal grave. "I should mention that if you're not interested in this generous settlement offer, things could become very difficult for you," she continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. "I have connections at City Hall, County Planning, even the State Real Estate Commission. People who can make life very unpleasant for someone who refuses to be reasonable about legitimate business opportunities." That crossed the line from bribery into extortion territory, and I could practically hear Rebecca cheering from her legal aid office. "Are you threatening me, Brenda?" I asked, giving her one final chance to back down before she committed to felony charges. "I'm just explaining reality," she replied with the cold confidence of someone who thought they held all the cards. "Small towns run on relationships and favors. People who cooperate with community improvement efforts tend to have fewer problems with permits, inspections, tax assessments, that sort of thing. People who fight progress sometimes find that bureaucracy can be very challenging." The recording was gold-plated evidence of attempted bribery, extortion, and abuse of public office connections. But Brenda still wasn't finished destroying herself. "Think about it carefully, Dale. 20,000 cash, no questions asked, clean break from all this mess. Or you can keep fighting and watch your life get very complicated very quickly." She slid the envelope across my patio table like a poker player going all in. "I'll need an answer by tomorrow evening. After that, this generous offer expires and we handle things the hard way." I looked at the money, then at Brenda's expectant face, then at Rex, who was growling low enough to rattle windows. "I'll definitely think about it," I said, which was technically true since I'd be thinking about how to use this recording to put her in prison. "Can I keep this overnight to consider my options?" Her smile was pure predatory satisfaction. "Of course. Just remember, this is your chance to walk away from all this unpleasantness with your dignity and your bank account intact." She stood to leave, then turned back with afterthought that sealed her fate. "Oh, and Dale, I'd hate for anything unfortunate to happen to Rex while you're making your decision. Dogs can be so vulnerable to accidents in neighborhoods where people aren't being cooperative." That threat against my dog was the final nail in her criminal coffin. Rex wasn't just property to threaten, he was family. And threatening family meant Brenda had just declared total war against someone with the evidence, community support, and legal backing to destroy her completely. Tomorrow's town council meeting was going to be very interesting. The town council chambers had never seen a crowd like Tuesday evening's turnout. Every seat was filled, with standing room only along the walls and people spilling into the hallway like it was a championship game instead of a municipal meeting. Word had spread through Millfield's networks faster than gossip at a church social. The showdown between Dale and Brenda was finally happening, and nobody wanted to miss the fireworks. I arrived early, carrying a briefcase stuffed with evidence that felt heavier than a mechanic's toolbox. Rebecca sat beside me, projecting the quiet confidence of a lawyer who'd spent the weekend preparing for legal battle. Behind us, our coalition had assembled like an army. Mildred with her tablet full of security footage, Frank with his stack of HOA documents, Mrs. Patterson with her teacher's eye for detail, and a dozen other neighbors who'd suffered under Brenda's harassment campaign. The local news crew from Channel 7 had set up cameras after Sarah Kim's newspaper investigation went viral, bringing regional attention to what she dubbed the Millfield harassment scandal. Reporter Jennifer Walsh, no relation to the city planning Jennifer, was interviewing residents about systematic intimidation tactics targeting elderly homeowners. The story had legs, and everyone knew tonight would determine whether justice prevailed or money won. Brenda arrived fashionably late with an expensive lawyer who probably charged more per hour than I made in a month. She'd dressed for court, conservative suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in what image consultants call trustworthy professional. But her eyes held the desperate intensity of someone whose entire scheme was about to collapse in public. Mayor Patricia Rodriguez called the meeting to order with the gravity of someone who understood that tonight's proceedings would define her administration's legacy. "We're here to address allegations of systematic harassment targeting longtime residents," she announced, her voice carrying over the packed room. "This is serious business that affects our entire community's character and safety." Sheriff's Deputy Martinez took the podium first, reading from an official report that detailed months of escalating criminal activity. "We have documented evidence of property destruction, environmental crimes, interference with emergency services, and attempted extortion," he stated with professional precision. "This investigation has revealed an organized campaign designed to force property sales through illegal intimidation." Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in that room, and pulled out my phone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to hear something recorded yesterday morning in my backyard." The audio quality was crystal clear as Brenda's voice filled the chamber, offering $20,000 to terminate my sheriff's lease, threatening bureaucratic retaliation, and finally promising that things could become very difficult if I refused her generous offer. The room went dead silent except for the soft whir of news cameras recording every word. You could hear people's breath catching as Brenda's recorded voice detailed her development schemes, her connections at City Hall, and her plans to make life very challenging for uncooperative residents. But the gasp that echoed through the chamber came when her voice threatened Rex. Dogs can be so vulnerable to accidents in neighborhoods where people aren't being cooperative. Brenda's expensive lawyer was frantically scribbling notes and whispering urgent advice, but the damage was irreversible. You can't spin away your own voice making criminal threats on high-quality audio recording. Fire Chief Torres took the podium next, his voice shaking with controlled anger as he described blocked emergency access during Mrs. Morgan's house fire. "Someone deliberately obstructed life-saving equipment during an active emergency response," he announced. "Mrs. Morgan could have died because of those barriers, and we have evidence linking their placement to this harassment campaign." The mayor asked Brenda if she wanted to respond to the allegations. Her lawyer advised against speaking, but Brenda's ego couldn't resist one final attempt at controlling the narrative. She approached the microphone with the confidence of someone who still believed money and connections could overcome evidence and community outrage. "This is all a gross misunderstanding blown out of proportion by people who resist positive change," she began, her voice carrying the condescending tone that had infuriated neighbors for months. "I've been trying to enhance property values and improve our community's character through legitimate business development opportunities." That's when Frank Morrison stood up in the back of the room, his postmaster's voice cutting through her prepared speech like a blade. "Brenda, we've got your HOA meeting minutes where you called longtime residents obstacles to progress and discussed accelerating turnover through strategic pressure. We've got your contractor receipts for those emergency access barriers. We've got video of you vandalizing property and contaminating storm drains." His voice rose with righteous anger. "You tried to destroy our community for profit, and everybody in this room knows it." The crowd erupted in applause that lasted nearly 2 minutes. When Mayor Rodriguez finally restored order, She announced that the city council was unanimously authorizing full cooperation with county prosecutors investigating criminal charges. "This behavior has no place in Millfield," she declared. "Our community protects its most vulnerable residents, not preys on them." County Prosecutor James Mitchell stepped forward with the authority of someone delivering justice. "Mrs. Thompson, you're under arrest for attempted extortion, environmental crimes, interference with emergency services, and conspiracy to commit fraud." As Deputy Martinez read her rights, Brenda's composure finally cracked completely. Her expensive lawyer was already discussing plea bargains while she was led away in handcuffs. The room erupted again as justice was served with the satisfaction of a community that had fought back and won. Chuck sat in the back row, looking relieved that his nightmare marriage was finally ending. Rex, waiting outside with Mildred, probably heard the cheering from the parking lot. Justice served, community protected, and one predatory neighbor permanently removed from our peaceful neighborhood. 3 months later, Millfield felt like a completely different town. Or maybe it was just returning to what it had always been before Brenda's toxic presence poisoned our community spirit. The morning sun still hit my kitchen window the same way, casting long shadows across Sarah's coffee mug that I still couldn't bring myself to put away. But now I could drink my coffee without checking over my shoulder for surveillance cameras or waiting for the next harassment bombshell to explode. Brenda's criminal trial had been mercifully brief once the prosecutor presented our mountain of evidence. She pled guilty to extortion, environmental crimes, and interference with emergency services in exchange for 18 months in county jail and 5 years probation. Her landscaping business collapsed faster than a house of cards in a hurricane, and Chuck filed for divorce before she was even sentenced. The house next door sold to a young teaching couple from Austin who baked cookies for the entire block and actually asked permission before borrowing my ladder. My expanded county lease was officially approved the day after Brenda's arrest, bringing in $1,000 monthly that not only covered the increased property taxes, but provided the financial security I'd been desperately missing since Sarah passed. Deputy Martinez now shares garage space with the fire department's emergency equipment and the county's new community outreach coordinator, turning my property into an unofficial neighborhood safety hub that genuinely enhanced everyone's property values. Ironic, considering Brenda's original complaints. The transformation rippled through our community in ways nobody expected. Sheriff's Department presented Rex with an honorary K-9 unit certificate during a block party that drew half the town to my backyard, complete with the smell of grilling burgers mixing with diesel exhaust from the fire truck that kids were climbing on like playground equipment. Watching my German Shepherd pose for photos with actual police dogs while wearing a badge-shaped name tag was probably the highlight of my entire retirement. Frank Morrison was elected HOA president in a landslide victory, running on transparency and community service instead of harassment and intimidation. His first official act was implementing term limits and requiring recorded meetings, ensuring future Brendas couldn't weaponize neighborhood politics against vulnerable residents. The HOA budget now funds annual festivals and emergency preparedness programs instead of legal fees for frivolous complaints. Rebecca Martinez expanded her legal aid practice to specialize in elder harassment cases, using our documentation system as a template for communities across Texas dealing with similar predatory behavior. She's helped prosecute systematic harassment campaigns in 6 other towns, turning our local victory into a statewide movement for vulnerable resident protection. Sometimes one person's courage to fight back can protect thousands of others, but the most meaningful change happened in smaller, daily moments that restored faith in human decency. Mildred's garden parties became weekly institutions where neighbors shared resources and friendship instead of complaints and suspicions. Mrs. Patterson organized walking groups that were really excuses for retired folks to check on each other's well-being while getting exercise. The Rodriguez family opened their garage for community tool sharing, creating the mutual support network that makes small towns feel like extended family. I established the Sarah Hensley Memorial Scholarship Fund, using a portion of my increased lease income, providing annual college assistance for local students planning careers in community service, teaching, nursing, social work, law enforcement. The first recipient was Maria Santos's daughter, heading to nursing school with dreams of working in rural communities that reminded me why Sarah would have loved this legacy. Every year, watching those kids graduate knowing they'll help other communities stay strong, I can almost hear Sarah's proud whisper in the evening breeze. 6 months after Brenda's arrest, I was working in Sarah's restored rose garden when laughter drifted over the fence from next door. The new neighbor's twin daughters had discovered that Rex was a pushover for belly rubs and tennis ball games, transforming my protective guard dog into the neighborhood's favorite babysitter. Their parents, both teachers drawn to Millfield by news reports about our strong community values, were already organizing parent-teacher conferences in their living room. Standing in my driveway that evening, watching those little girls giggle while Rex patiently endured dress-up games, I realized something Sarah would have appreciated deeply. Communities aren't destroyed by individual predators. They're strengthened when ordinary people decide that protecting each other matters more than avoiding conflict. The smell of barbecue smoke drifted from multiple backyards, mixing with children's laughter and Rex's contented sighs. This was what home was supposed to sound, smell, and feel like. Your turn now. Drop a comment sharing your own HOA horror story or neighbor nightmare. You're not alone in these battles, and your community has more power than you realize. Subscribe to HOA Stories for more accounts of ordinary people fighting back against unfair systems, and hit that notification bell because justice stories drop every day. Remember, sunlight really is the best disinfectant for neighborhood bullies.
From all of us here at HOA Stories, thanks so much for watching today's HOA Karen Meltdown. If you enjoyed seeing neighbors stand their ground and karma catch up, smash that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA drama we bring you.